My name is Skeen, and today I'll be presenting on my senior thesis titled Coloring the Canon, the Revisionist Work of Mickalene Thomas. And we're going to begin with an activity. Can you name 5 women artists? The National Museum of Women in the Arts first asked this question to its followers in March 2016 in honor of Women's History Month. Take the note card in front of you and write down the names of 5 women artists. Okay, now even if you don't have 5, can you name 5 artists of color? I'm seeing enough blank stares. Finally, can you name 5 women artists of color? This is an activity you can engage in as well after the presentation. It's no wonder that people have difficulty naming 5 women artists, 5 artists of color, and 5 women artists of color, considering who we see represented in our museums and galleries and in the art historical canon. American art museums have long been elite, white, male-dominated spaces. When women have appeared in these spaces, they historically have been white, Euro-American women, and the subjects, or muses. Rarely have women of color been represented in the museum as in artworks or as artists. Mickalene Thomas, a contemporary African-American gay woman artist, makes an intervention by adding more diverse voices and stories to the American canon and museum. This senior thesis explores issues of race, gender, and sexuality in American culture through the lens of art and art history. Mickalene Thomas is motivated to transform the idea of the female nude. Her work tells the stories that museum collections do not represent. Thomas makes an intervention in the museum through revisions of famous historical artworks to interrogate gender and racial biases that underlie the original compositions. Thomas's intervention is a right topic for an American Studies scholar. Thomas engages in the American ideological behavior of reinvention. Her work is uniquely American in that she takes something old and reimagines it. One example of Thomas's art historical revisionism is her piece Origin of the Universe, which makes reference to 19th century French painter Gustave Courbet's painting titled L'Origine du Monde, or Origin of the World. Origin of the World depicts a naked white female with her legs spread and her vagina in the foreground. Thomas reimagines this image as a self-portrait in which she depicts her own body. The focal point of both paintings is the woman's vagina. The woman is reclining, her legs open for the viewer to enter the canvas. The vantage point is enhanced by the way that both Thomas and Courbet form a triangular composition with her 2 legs entering from opposite sides of the foreground. Here, the body is totally decontextualized. The perspective of both portraits is severely cropped. The viewer is not able to see the woman's head. The sheets frame the body, cutting off the face. This placement is very intentional. Again, it draws attention to the vagina, and also it's not particularly realistic, as it would be odd for the blankets to cover the head and not the body. This specific aspect of the body, the vagina, is truly on display in these portraits. Thomas's reimagination of Courbet's image is less concerned with realism. Thomas deviates from Courbet with the decision to abstract details of the female body. The corners and cracks of the body and genitalia are not seen. She does not articulate the folds of the labia, and she uses rhinestones to represent pubic hair. Thomas also decides to use sharp colors, which are very different from the sombering tones of Courbet's painting. The green and yellow colors create a contrast and are reminiscent of neon lights. Thomas's use of vibrant colors are a way to allow an old painting to relive in the present. The yellow bed sheets, which look more like hills or mountains than blankets, differ from Courbet's white curving sheets that hug the body. Courbet's painting is more biological, whereas Thomas's is more expressive. Courbet's painting represents the vagina as the origin of the world, the baby-making machine. Thomas's piece seems to detach from that idea. She uses abstraction as a technique to capture the essence and emotional feeling. White vaginas and black vaginas have been depicted in different ways throughout art history. A sentence I thought I'd never say in an academic presentation. Black women have been sexualized throughout history, but rarely are they and their genitalia depicted in such a straightforward way. Thomas's work strikes a balance between admiring the work of modern masters like Courbet and providing a counter-narrative to his art. Courbet portrayed a white woman's vagina and named it the origin of the world. Thomas takes that idea a step further, in asserting that a black woman's vagina is the origin of the universe. By depicting herself in the portrait, Thomas puts herself at the center of the universe, so to speak, taking ownership over her work and her being. Thomas was interested in recasting Courbet's infamous painting, particularly because it dealt with the idea of voyeurism, the practice of gaining sexual pleasure from watching others when they are naked or engaged in sexual activity. Courbet's painting was a commissioned piece that served as erotica for the male patron. In revising this work, Thomas reclaims the idea of looking at and portraying the naked female body. However, Thomas's choice to depict such a lewd subject may not be that subversive. By doing so, she arguably propagates the same dangerous practices as historical male artists who took advantage of women. This analysis prompts an interesting question, and it's one that I'm still wrestling with. How can an artist portray the body, particularly the black female body, without exploiting stereotypes, such as the idea of women as muses, subjects of the gaze, or spectacles? Thomas's painting can be seen as reductive to a woman's sexuality, just as Courbet's painting. Is her work any more individualized than Courbet's? Thomas also chose not to depict the face. How is she representing the nuances and individualized features of herself in this self-portrait? If she's truly trying to celebrate the body, why does she make it so illicit? As we look at issues of representation in art and art history, we must grapple with this tension. To give you an idea of the wider breadth of the work that Thomas does and how I'm analyzing it in my thesis, I'll provide an example of another type of Thomas's work: portraits of famous black women. Thomas created this portrait of Michelle Obama, titled Michelle O, in 2008 to celebrate the historic presidential election. Unlike the Courbet image, where Thomas does not even show a face, here she shows a famous black female icon, which offers insight into the other intervention she's making. Thomas is negotiating how black women look and are visible in society, especially famous black women. And her work addresses timely and relevant subjects. Amy Sherrill just painted the First Lady's portrait for display in the National Portrait Gallery. If you want to help solve the problem of underrepresentation in the world of American art and culture, it's not just by reading my thesis, which I would obviously appreciate. You can participate in activism efforts, such as Wikipedia edit-a-thons that seek to provide more content about minority artists, including women artists and artists of color. Thank you.
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit at the end with showing the portrait of Michelle Obama, but does Thomas restrict herself to different eras of art and how she is revisionist, or because obviously 19th century art would be a great time period to just focus on in terms of revising and editing the kind of characterizations of black women, or does she kind of move throughout all aspects of the spectrum?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the analysis and scholarship that's been done thus far on Thomas mostly focuses on that revisionism of 19th century art. However, Thomas incorporates a lot of different artistic styles from the 19th century to contemporary in her work, including, as you can see in this work, kind of a lot of retro interior type styles that are reminiscent of the 1970s and particularly 1970s Black culture. Yeah, Richie?
Yeah. One thing I thought that stood out to me that was pretty interesting, you mentioned she used rhinestones in a painting. I was just wondering if there was any kind of significance to that, or if she did that a lot.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, Thomas incorporates a lot of unconventional media in her work, including rhinestones, which are, craft art, more lowbrow, into painting, which is obviously kind of highbrow work. There are a lot of interesting things that her rhinestones communicate. One of which, rhinestones, bling, has obviously been associated with Black culture for a long time. Additionally, use of craft materials makes historic reference to women who were sort of limited to making craft art. Additionally, use of rhinestones makes reference to kind of affordability, and as she was beginning her career as an artist, she couldn't always afford nice paints, so she incorporated lots of craft materials. And also, I think one of the most profound things is her work seeks to bring visibility to Black women, and rhinestones bring visibility because they reflect light. They very much are, the media definitely reinforces her message.
How did you choose Mickalene Thomas to explore diversity and inclusivity in the museum experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of artists kind of grapple with similar messages as Mickalene Thomas. But one reason first of all, I was really interested in her work. And then secondly, Mickalene Thomas is certainly well known. She makes news headlines, but only in specific domains. So she's talked about, but only in certain realms, much in academic and scholarly realms. So in a way, my work seeks to kind of bring greater visibility to her, just as her work seeks to bring greater visibility to the experiences of Black women. Thanks. Alex?
I was wondering, in your research, did any well-known American museums do a particularly good job of showcasing minority artists, and conversely, did any do a very poor job?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That was actually kind of one of my motivating questions as it began the project. I was most interested in looking at how particularly mainstream art museums were exhibiting minority art. With Thomas, her art has actually been exhibited in mostly a favorable, not super problematic way. However, one example is actually her piece Origin of the Universe, which we looked at, when it was shown at the Brooklyn Museum in an exhibition named Origin of the Universe, kind of a mid-career survey of Thomas, you had to view it through a peephole, and I'm not sure whether that was her choice or the museum's choice, but that seems to kind of load the message a bit more that this is something wrong we shouldn't all be looking at. So that was kind of an interesting, perhaps a bit jarring. Yeah.
Can you tell us about your research process, sort of where you started, what types of things you read, what you were involved in throughout this?
Sure, absolutely. I would say that kind of my research and analysis was mostly grounded in the images themselves. At first, I was really interested in focusing on Mickalene Thomas's biography, but kind of as art historians know, the issue of focusing on biography and identity of artists and analyzing their work can be problematic. So I ended up focusing mostly on images, which is great for me, kind of really digging into visual analysis. I also looked at exhibition materials, and actually this weekend I'm going to Seattle to see an exhibition that she's featured in called Figuring History, all about revising history. So I'll be looking forward to adding that content in as well. Yeah.
Did you look at a particular show of Thomas's, or did you just kind of look at her work as just a large body of work?
That's a good question. I definitely did focus on a few shows, but largely it was looking at her larger body of work and sort of seeing the various interventions that were made through different kind of phases of her career. Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.